Ryan, you were asked up at the podium about wide receivers 4 through 7, and I didn't hear the name Jeremiah Smith. So safe to assume Jeremiah Smith is trending towards the 1 through 3 end of things?
Yeah, I guess we could say he's trending. Trying to, again, keep some of that hype down a little bit, until he actually plays a snap at Ohio State. But, it's no secret how talented he is, and he'll be a big part of our offense this year.
What is it that sets him apart as a player that puts him in that kind of position?
Well, I think the first thing is you see the size, you see the strength, you see the explosiveness, you see the ball skills, but then you also see the discipline. This is somebody that, he goes hard every single time he's out there. He learns quickly, so there's a lot there to like.
Now, you guys, this time last year, we're talking about Luke Montgomery. He's someone who's going to be a freshman who sees the field and not going to be someone who redshirts. What's the list of freshmen who are probably not going to redshirt look like to you right now?
Well, the way that we look at it is because you can play 4 games and then play in the postseason, we don't really look at it like that. What we try to do is figure out how many of these guys can we get reps and get them in the game. And then once it comes to have to play in that 5th game, then we make that decision. So we want everybody to feel like they're going to play in the game and prepare to play in the game. I don't see... maybe a couple offensive linemen that are probably redshirt. For the most of them, I think that, they should be coming in expecting to play. And actually, now that I think about it, I think certainly the guys who came in January should expect to play. The guys that come in the summer are a little bit behind, but who knows? Maybe they can, cover some ground here in the preseason.
So let's talk a little bit about those guys who showed up in the summer. Mylan Graham is sort of the big name of those in terms of just looking at the star rankings and all that. But, obviously we know that doesn't mean anything when they get there. So what have you seen from those guys, during their first month and a half or so on campus?
The bottom line is when you come into the summer, you're behind. It's just the way it is. Lincoln kind of went through that this year. Last year, Brandon kind of went through that last year. And so, they have to make up ground quickly. So Demarion Witten, Mylan Graham, Leroy Roker, I'm going to forget some of the guys. But, as they came in those first couple of weeks, it takes a little while to get going. Excited about all of their ability. I think all those guys are going to be really good Buckeyes. I think we've hit with all those guys. Gabe Van Sickle, really excited. There's not one of them we're like, boy, that was a bust, or he doesn't belong. We feel good about all of them. They're just a little bit behind because they didn't have the whole spring to go through practice and go through the winter program.
This is obviously a year of firsts and a year of different things in college football, and I'm sure you're going to get asked about playoff and all that kind of stuff. I want to ask you about a couple of the other things. The change in the accountable coaches rule. How are you guys planning on taking advantage of that, and what does that potentially open up for you guys as a program?
Well, it's not going to change too much this year. We'll take a look at it maybe as we head into next year. But, we already kind of are in pretty good position with the guys that we have. Tim Drebno, somebody who's, coached a lot of football before. Billy Fessler. The guys on the defensive side of the ball like Sam McGrath and Aaron Duhart. All those guys are, very, very good coaches. They've coached at other places. And so now, they're able to get on the field and actually coach. So they've already been assigned positions already. Now they're just, they've been out there on the field. They haven't been able to coach. They've been able to kind of coach the coaches. Now they're able to actually interact with the players. So, we'll kind of see what that looks like as we, get going with the season, decide kind of where we want it to be structurally at the end of the season. But the good news is those guys can jump right in and help out.
With the change to the it's no longer divisions here for the Big Ten championship game, you could play a team 2, even 3 times this year, theoretically. How does that change your approach? How much additional prep work is that? How much additional video scouting are you guys going to have to do? And how much strain does that put on the staff to do whatever that added burden is?
Well, actually, when you play a team multiple times, you don't need to do as much work in terms of prep work because you've already watched the film and you already kind of know them. What it is going to, force us to do is, think about when you watch the NFL games and, see the team that plays multiple teams within a division or then plays another team in the playoffs. Like, what does that look like? What are some of the things? And those are some of the conversations that we've already had. Certainly, we have some really good, background in the NFL. Tim Walton's been in the NFL for a long time. Chip obviously was a head coach in the NFL. James Laurinaitis, Brian Hartline. So, a lot of these guys have been in that league before, understand what it is. So when it comes down to those times, you'll have to pull back on that experience to figure out, what does that mean? and how do we, we don't want to completely change things, but we want to change things enough to keep them on their heels.
Now, that NFL experience might be helpful in a couple other different ways. One is the addition of the helmet communication technology this year. When we talked to you guys in the spring, it was kind of like, well, we're sort of figuring it out. How much progress did you make on that during the course of the spring? And is that going to have an impact on how quickly you can get plays in? Is that going to have an impact on tempo? Like, what is that going to have an impact on in terms of the on-field this fall?
I think the first thing is what it's done is it's the same for both sides. Mm-hmm. So there's no advantage, but it has eliminated the, being forced to signal. So now, I can get the play in, and it shuts off at 15 seconds. And Chip's done that before in the NFL, but we used it all spring, and it was good. And there's some things that you can do that are different. You can communicate and tell the quarterback a little more information. Now, some quarterbacks don't like getting all that information. But I think that also, I think the other big thing is on the sideline, the tablets. Being able to watch the last series on a tablet after the series is done is going to be a big difference. Again, no advantage one side or the other, but different. Ultimately, it's always going to just come down to winning the line of scrimmage, running the football, fundamentals. I mean, you're still going to play the game of football, but there are some things that are different that we're going to have a plan for, which we already do.
Change number 4,720 this year is the addition of the 2-minute warning and some of the clock changes.
Yeah.
That's another thing where, and as an NFL guy, NFL background with Chip having the same deal and everyone else you mentioned, how does that change your approach towards the end of a half? In terms of clock management, you've kind of dealt with this before. What does that look like?
Well, I think it is different with the 2-minute warning. We've gone through and we've looked and done some studies on the NFL and when are the right times to call timeout in a 2-minute, 4-minute situation. It certainly brings in a whole different dynamic to the end of the game. There's no question about that. But we do have some data points on that. I think that the difference, obviously, in college is that the clock will still stop after a first down. So all those numbers aren't exactly perfect when it comes to some of the data points. But we've met with some different analytics groups to have a plan for that. Some of the analytics, really do help you. Other things you got to, kind of have a feel for a little bit. And so, really spend a little bit more time on that as the head coach and allowing Chip to call the plays and making sure that I'm aware of the analytics.
And the last question I had was, you're kind of going through the recruiting process on the other side of things now with your son, RJ. What have you seen? What have you learned through that process, going through it as a parent, that maybe is changing something that you're looking at it from the coach side?
I just think that when he goes on a visit, some of the feedback that I get, it helps me a little bit because, I share with our staff, like, when someone goes on your campus, they have certain expectations, and when they leave, what are they saying? What do they see? What are their experiences? And it's just given me a decent perspective on that, which has been great. But more importantly, I like doing it as a dad, spending time together and talking about it.
Cool. Thank you.
No problem. Okay.